Hey guys, so I just want to review sentence types before you take your daily grade, and this is a video that you can go back and look at and rewatch at any time to help you complete tasks and assignments. So we're going to start from the very beginning again. So when we have and talk about sentences, there are two types of clauses that make up sentences. One is an independent clause. It can stand alone. This is a complete sentence. A dependent clause can't stand alone. It's an incomplete sentence. Think about it in terms of being an adult and a child. You are dependent upon your parents because you can't support yourself or stand alone, but your parents are independent because they can support themselves and you. So when we talk about sentence types, we have four different types: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Let's start with simple. Simple sentences contain one independent clause. The example here is I ran down the street. Your formula for simple sentences is S equals I. Simple equals one independent clause. Compound sentences contain two independent clauses. Example here is I ran down the street, comma, and I tripped over a rock. If you notice, your formula for compound sentences is I plus I. Well, that has to be joined and it has to be glued together by either a comma and a fanboys or a semicolon. Remember we talked about the comma and fanboys, they're married. You will always see them together in a compound sentence. You can't have one without the other. And the semicolon is single. So compound sentences contain two independent clauses. So if you notice, the independent clauses in this example are highlighted blue. I ran down the street. That's one complete independent clause. I tripped over a rock. That's also one complete independent clause. If we take those two sentences and join them together and put comma and in the middle, it becomes a compound sentence because there is more than one independent clause in that sentence. Complex sentences contain one independent clause and one dependent clause. Your example here is because I ran down the street, I tripped over a rock. Because, if you notice, is one of your white buses. Your complex sentences will always have a white bus somewhere in the sentence because that is what starts your dependent clause. So your formula for complex is either I plus D or D plus I. You can switch it either way. If you have the dependent clause first, like I have in this sentence here, there will always be a comma after it. So when you have a complex sentence, you need to pay attention to the punctuation mark. So let's look again at the sentence that I have here. Because I ran down the street. That is not a complete sentence. How do I know that? Because it can't stand alone. And I see a white bus. So because I ran down the street is dependent. I tripped over a rock is a complete sentence, so that is independent. So because I ran down the street is D, I tripped over a rock is I. And last we have compound complex sentences. These sentences contain two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses. You really have got to break down your sentences in order to figure out what type of sentence it is. So the example here is because I ran down the street, I tripped over a rock and I scraped my knee. So your formula for compound complex is I plus D or D plus I plus I. And every now and then you can have I plus D plus I, but it is very uncommon. When you have a dependent clause, remember commas always come after the dependent clauses. Same thing as before. Because I ran down the street, that's a dependent clause, and then I see a comma. In compound complex sentences, you're going to see two things. You're going to see a white bus somewhere. Remember, those are your subordinating conjunctions. Remember, we have bus and sub. So that means sub is bus spelled backwards. So keep that in mind when you're trying to remember the difference between your subordinating conjunctions and your coordinating conjunctions. So we know we're going to see a subordinating conjunction and we're either going to see a comma and a fanboy or a semicolon. So we'll see two things. In this sentence, I have it highlighted pink. Because is our white bus, comma, and is our coordinating conjunction. So because I see a white bus and a coordinating conjunction, and I have two independent clauses and a dependent clause, I know that this sentence is compound complex. So hopefully this was a good review. And remember, you can come back and watch this anytime to help you when we're talking about sentence types.